starting now. All right, I'd like to remind everyone that it will be recorded. It will be taking questions following the presentation, but you should feel free to enter your questions or comments into the chat at any time. And I'd like to also invite you to join our Dean's Digital Cafe Canvas course, which I will post in the chat, the link to which you can find in the chat, where you can find recordings of today's and past events. Before introducing our speaker, Dr. Christman, I'd like to acknowledge the land. The Long Island campus of New York Tech sits on a larger territory known as Pominoke, which was home to numerous indigenous communities, including the local tribes of the Mattincocks and the Merricks. I'd like to acknowledge the land, the stewardship, and sovereignty of the native peoples and their enduring importance, even in this virtual environment, to our work and community here today. Okay, now with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sophie Christman. Dr. Christman is a visiting professor of humanities at the New York Institute of Technology. Her research interests include the environmental humanities, 19th century literature, and film studies. She has recently presented at NYIT faculty development workshops on AI for research and teaching, humanities AI and grants for humanities. Along with other New York Tech faculty, she will soon be presenting a funded public humanities talk on American healthcare in the Big Apple at the New York Tech NYC campus. Professor Christman is a reviewer for the United States Department of Education and is chair of the Long Island Council and New York State Conference for the American Association of University Professors. She is currently completing a monograph entitled The Sustainable Citizen. Well, with that, welcome, Sophie, and I think you could do worse today than to be telling us about Robert Frost. And we're looking forward to hear why he only says that good fences make good neighbors. Okay. So please share your screen and we can get started.
Thank you. Can you see the screen? Let me make sure.
I can see it.
Everybody? Yes? Good?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, let me start over again. That's why I thought there's a
checking.
Yeah, so there's an echo. Did you all hear that? Yeah? Or should I start again?
We weren't able to hear you at the beginning.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Sophie's going to start from the beginning. Sorry about that.
We have four computers here and two voices and many more.
Okay.
So thank you for inviting me here today to the Dean's Digital Cafe. My talk is on repairing the world, ecopoetic asymmetry in Robert Frost's Mending Wall. I'm excited to talk to you about ecopoetry, that is poetry about nature and the environment. I love studying and teaching ecopoetry to STEM students in particular because ecopoetry to me offers ways to study science, math, engineering, and the sequencing and symmetry, or sometimes asymmetry, which we'll talk about today, of words that focus on nature and the environment. In our time here today at the Dean's Digital Cafe, I will talk about the poetry of 20th century American poet Robert Frost. During today's cafe, I will do three things. I will start with a general overview of poetry in order to get you thinking about sequencing and why it is important in poetry and math in terms of the order of operations. I will tell you a little bit about Robert Frost's life and career, but with a twist. And three, I will offer a close reading. I'm trying to advance the slide.
It's on the screen. Move the mouse to the screen. To your other screen.
Yeah.
Then move it up to the display screen.
Yeah, where is it?
You're on the screen still, so reach up to the top. No, or maybe go to the left. Maybe get on the mouse.
Help!
Let's get the mouse onto the other screen.
We have
there we
three computers.
Click on. There we go.
Great. Okay, so 3, I will offer a close reading of Robert Frost's classic poem, Mending. I'll discuss why I think this poem offers us the idea of, quote, a diplomacy of difference, end quote, through the concept of civil dialogue. I will suggest that the poem, penned before the First World War, suggested a method of interdependent diplomacy necessary to resolve global conflicts. In his spare one-stanza, 46-line poem set outdoors over 2 of the 4 seasons, Frost emphasizes people's differences, but also their common goals. To start, what is a poem? According to the Oxford English Dictionary, a poem is, quote, a piece of writing in which the expression of feelings and ideas is given intensity by particular attention to diction, sometimes involving rhyme, rhythm, and imagery. When my students and I discuss poetry, we talk about how, unlike a novel, every single word is important in a poem. Every word is important and intentional. And poetry is structured through lines, stanzas, or complete forms like sonnets, odes, or ballads. Form can also refer to stanza patterns in poems like rhyming couplets. Ecopoetry in particular involves, quote, the relationship between nature and culture, language and perception. In particular, poets are concerned with the effects of the turning of the line, which occurs at the end of a line of verse. So you can see in this poem that I put up, Anecdote of the Jar by Wallace Stevens, the end of the line, there are 4 lines. The first line ends with the word Tennessee. So, in fact, the word verse means to turn. At the turning of a line, we can often see a break in a logical phrase, or a continuation, or the conclusion or ending of a logical unit. For instance, if we look at Stevens's poem Anecdote of the Jar, which reads, quote, I placed a jar in Tennessee, and round it was upon a hill. It made the slovenly wilderness surround that hill. End quote. We see a clear break after the first line. We also move from culture and place to manufactured jar and nature to industry versus wilderness and perception and effect of industry on nature. I also want to emphasize in my talk today why in poetry the sequence or order of words in a poem is important. For instance, the order of operations is a set of rules that in math, using parentheses, brackets, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction, evaluates mathematical expressions. It's a rule that requires operations to be done in a specific order. The rules are formalized by ranking and precedence and require operations with higher precedence to be performed before operations with lower precedence, like parentheses, those of you who are math folks, math students. In poetry, a poet employs an order of operations too, concerning the words. And poetry is often written, read, and heard in different languages. We know that the earliest form of writing traces about 8000 BC. In modern times, English alphabetic writing systems read from left to right, but Arabic, Hebrew, Persian, and Urdu alphabetics read from right to left. I want to emphasize the mathematical concept of order of operations and sequencing here because sequencing is very important in Robert Frost's poem. And just as an aside, I'm not quite done with my reading yet, so I'm hoping to get some good questions today and maybe some good comments that will help me with my interpretation of the poem. So let me emphasize sequencing in order by giving you a brief biography of Frost. Frost was born during an era that saw the 1897 Western Union subterranean ocean telegraph that connected Havana to Key West, the advent of the 1903 Army War College and 1911 Army Service Schools, the 1912 Manual on Cryptology and various telephone spelling alphabets. Frost and his wife Eleanor lived at Dairy Farm from 1900 to 1911. He first taught at Pinkerton Academy and writing poetry all the while. In 1911, Frost began teaching at Plymouth Normal School. His career included teaching stints a 3-year relocation to Gloucestershire, England during the dawn of modernist poetry, and numerous other college teaching positions. At times throughout his writing life, the American Poet Laureate was periodically deployed by the U.S. State Department as an emissary. Frost was the first inaugural poet. He was invited to the 1961 presidential inauguration of John F. Kennedy, where he composed a new poem called Dedication for the event. This poem was not actually read at the Kennedy inauguration because it was a very snowy day. And when Frost arrived at the podium and he was trying to read his long poem, the glare that was coming off of the snow prevented him from actually reading. So instead, he recited from his memory his well-known poem, The Gift, outright. By 1963, the poet was awarded 4 Pulitzer Prizes and 26 honorary doctorates. That year, U.S. President John F. Kennedy visited Amherst College for a posthumous dedication of the Robert Frost Library. In his 6-page speech, President Kennedy emphasized the high political value of Frost's poetry by postulating that, quote, when power corrupts, poetry cleanses, end quote. More generally, the president offered that, quote, if art is to nourish the roots of our culture, society must set the artist free to follow his vision wherever it leads. Uh-oh, missing. Got my pages mixed up.
My memory.
Yeah.
There you go. Robert Frost.
So Frost's global diplomacy was inclusive of many diverse poetic styles. He employed variations on Persian poetic verse in his 1922 Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening poem. In this poem, Frost varies Omar Khayyam's Rubaiyat. Khayyam, a mathematician, created the Rubaiyat form of 2-line stanzas with 2 parts. Etymologically, Rubaiyat derives from the Arabic root for 4. Khayyam's collection consists of at least 1,200 quatrains, and the rhyme scheme usually follows AA, BA, BB, CB, CC, DC, and DD, AD. Frost, in typical 1920s modernist fashion, departs from tradition by changing the Rubaiyat rhyme scheme in Snowy Evening's last line to DDDD. So you can see the poem starts, whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping there to watch his woods fill up with snow, an AABA rhyme scheme. Normally, the poem would end with a DDAD rhyme scheme, but it ends, the woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep and miles to go before I sleep. Now, let's turn to Frost's poem, Mending Wall, the topic of our conversation today. His poem, Mending Wall, first appeared in his second book of poetry, North of Boston. Although Frost began his 18-poem book, North of Boston, in 1905, he wrote the bulk of these poems in 1913. He moved with his family to Gloucestershire, England from 1912 to 1915. Ezra Pound introduced Frost to Yeats, Ford Madox Ford, Harriet Monroe, and Edward Thomas Shepley Sargent. In an unpublished 1915 letter to Louis Untermeyer, Frost called himself a synecticist, explaining his partialness to using a part for the whole, right? And that's a device that we use in poetry. Frost notes that Mending Wall takes up the theme where his poem, A Tuft of Flowers, from his first poetry book, A Boy's Will, was published in 1913. The poem alludes to a proverb of relationships between distinct groups. In Tuft of Flowers, a mower cuts the grass, but leaves a patch of butterfly weed. A butterfly draws the attention of the poem's persona, and dreaming, as it were, held brotherly speech with one whose thought I had not hoped to reach. Quote, men work together, I told him from the heart, whether they work together or apart. So let's turn now to the poem, to Frost's poem, Mending Wall. The story of Mending Wall shows how two neighbors work together and yet apart. It takes pride of place as the book's first poem. In the first edition, first English issue of the book, Mending Wall is the first poem on Roman numeral page 2, as you can see. And I'm just going to take a moment and read the poem because I think it's important to read poetry. Poetry is meant to be heard, so let's just take a moment to do that. Mending Wall. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen ground swell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair, where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made, but at spring mending time, we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go, to each the boulders that have fallen to each. And some are loaves, and some so nearly balls, we have to use a spell to make them balance. Excuse me. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game. One on a side. It comes to little more. There, where it is, we do not need the wall. He is all pine, and I am all apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, quote, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is a mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only and the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. He says again, quote, good fences make good neighbors. So let's ask some questions about this poem. What does the poem's title suggest? Does anybody have any ideas?
Perhaps it's rebuilding borders.
Why is the first word in all caps? Why is the first word capitalized? The first two words capitalized. And who is the speaker of the poem? What are the circumstances of this poem? And what situation is presented? What is the form of the poem? How is that form related to the content or the meaning of the poem? Is sound an active element of the poem? Does the poem speak from a specific culture? Does it use imagery to provide a specific or particular effect? I would argue that it is possible that perhaps Frost uses the letters M and W in the poem's title as rotational ambigrams. Now, I haven't solidified or completely worked through this theory yet, so I'm open to any types of suggestions or comments you have. But I'm working on a theory that suggests these visual ambigrams transmit to the reader as a cipher depicting the tensions and affinities that occur, as Frost wrote to President Kennedy in 1962, of, quote, one world of independent nations, interdependent, the separateness of the parts as important as the connection of the parts, end quote. Further, let's explore the words mending and wall. What does that mean? What does the title mean, mending wall? Frost pairs the word mending with the word wall. Mending means to repair, yet wall means to set apart. And so we have a sort of cognitive dissonance where we have to hold in our minds two countervailing ideas or concepts at the same time. As scholars have noted, the poem's primary concern is two neighbors negotiating the repair of a boundary marker. Mending Wall's title presents us with a theme of parallelism that repeats over and over throughout the verse. Two neighbors, mending time, loaves and balls, pine and apple, the two seasons of winter and spring, and fences and neighbors. Frost's use of the coordinating conjunctive word and occurs 8 times at the beginning lines. I want to suggest here that his purposeful use of punctuation, the many commas, colons, semicolons, and end punctuation, there's 1 exclamation point, 2 questions, and numerous periods, as well as the spatial gaps seen in the poem's first edition, purposely position readers to engage in affective attachment and duality, or alternately, singularity and separation. The poem has an indeterminate beginning. It starts with the vague word something. It's odd that Frost uses an apostrophe to contract the words do not, N and T, in the poem's first line. The poem also focuses our ears to hear various sounds. Frost uses fricatives, F, V, S, Z, SH, sh, and nasals like M and N, liquids such as R, and the stops P, T, K, B, D, G. The title, something, starts with a fricative, some, and ends with an abrupt stop, thing, something. The setting is also a parallel. As a built environment, a mending wall is surrounded by wilderness. The environment is demarked by both a natural, it's the hill, an artificial boundary, the wall. We begin the poem by observing a wall and its frozen underground environment. At the middle of the poem, which you can see on the screen, the season has changed to spring. Interestingly, the pine cone is the tree's central means of reproduction, and pine cones are both male and female. The male cones reside on the bottom to prevent pollen from falling on female cones of same tree in order to enhance cross-fertilization. Additionally, male cones only present in spring when producing pollen. The apple tree, Malus domestica, offers deciduous fruit, and its seeds are surrounded by fruit. The apple's reproduction strategy is different than the pine's, since its flowers are cross-pollinated by bees. So this, again, is something I've noticed, but I haven't actually worked through yet in my paper. To date, there has also not been sufficient analysis of the poem's mathematical elements. Here, Frost sets up a mathematical formula involving coordinate geometry and defense. The word fence is a shortening of defense or protection and fortification, deriving from enclosure. His numerous plays on the words here and there are spatial maneuvers laid on the reader, since after all, in poetry, it is always about the turn of the line, as we discussed before. In the geometry of the title Mending Wall, M rotates in a half circle 180 degrees as a straight angle. So, and those of you who are, and I know you're all very bright in math, we remember that a square is an enclosed shape containing 4 right angles. So angles are the point where 2 lines meet. A right angle is 90 degrees. Both M and W have 4 lines, but each letter only contains 3 angles. And when you rotate the capital letter M by 180 degrees, it turns to W. When you rotate W, it turns to M. That is very significant since 180 degrees is only half a circle. So with that, I think I will drop those pieces of questions and comments and observations that I've made about this poem, because I'm still working through the math and I'm still working through some of the language. But I do want to say that both of the English letters M and W have 4 equal angles, but their lines don't form a square because of the slope of each line. So M is a significant alphabetic since its order of placement in the English alphabet is number 13. In fact, line 13 of the poem reads, "And on a day we meet to walk the line." So this mathematical reference is doubled in line 23. There where it is, we do not need the wall. Tyler Hoffman, whom I recently met and presented with at MLA, first alluded to this when he noted Frost's poetry plots out poetic sounds on the grid of meter. So here I'm trying to argue that Frost is employing an XY geometrical plane where Y is always vertical and X is always horizontal. In this type of coordinate geometry, the lines will never meet, but remain parallel. Frost's formulaic move to rotate the M to W by 180 degrees serves to cross the line and actually flip the x-axis. So that may be one suggestion or one theory in terms of why good fences make good neighbors. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sophie. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Let me see if I can put up the poem again.
Well, I for one really enjoyed listening to it because I think I looked at it beforehand, but I really didn't catch that pun, give offense, the first time through it. And reading it really makes a huge difference, right? Yeah, it's meant to be heard. It's meant to be, it's not just meant to be read, I guess. It's really, I mean, it's like you say, there's so much with the sounds of the letters and it's more of it's an auditory medium as well as
That's correct, right? Poetry, I think, is really meant to be heard. I think this, if I can link to this, this is actually a wonderful, I don't know if we can hear it. Can we hear it? That's Frost actually reading his poem. Is it picking up on your? No? Oh, okay. Okay.
You want to prefer yours?
Sure.
So I can. All right, I think we had some muting, some echoing problems. I apologize. Okay. Does anyone have any final questions for Sophie or for Dr. Christman? I'm sorry, I should say. All right. Well, if not, well, again, thank you. And thank you all for joining us here today. So please come again next Thursday, actually, the same time, same place, when Professor Jessica Houch will tell us about alternative universes and other fan work. So take care, enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to check out our Canvas course for archives of previous talks you may have missed. All right, signing off.
Thank you.
Bye.